The pandemic has exposed many problems within American society today. One of these is the minimum wage. Millions of families rely on the minimum wage, and yet the federal minimum wage, which is the same as the Oklahoman minimum wage, is simply not enough to live on. It has been over a decade since we last raised the minimum wage, and as a result, many families are unable to sustain themselves, and many generations of working class citizens are unable to contribute to the economy in ways that previous generations were able to. And also, because of inflation, the price of labor has greatly devalued, and employers have been quick to take advantage of this. They're pretty much extorting their employees for paying them poverty wages at the risk of starvation. This is why Congress proposed a bill that would raise the minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to a more livable wage. However, it did not pass. Regardless, I believe that we should raise the minimum wage to improve American life. It would have many, many benefits to society, while also raising the standard of living in America. First, we will review the history of the minimum wage, what it is, why it is important, and what its effects would be on the American economy if it were to be enacted. The first minimum wage was about 25 cents an hour. It was enacted by Franklin Delano Roosevelt to stabilize the economy post-Depression, and it was also to forbid American employers from paying below what would bring a minimum quality of life. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the 25 cents an hour would be about $5 an hour today. However, it was much cheaper to live back then. So according to NPR, the minimum wage for the annual salary was about $870. And the medium house was about $3,000. You can see how a person who lived modestly could save for a house within a few years. But according to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, there is currently no county in any state across America in which a working class person making minimum wage can afford a 2-bedroom apartment, let alone a house. Inflation is when the price of something goes up even though what you're paying for pretty much stays the same. It is a natural part of our economy. It goes up by a percent every year, but it's not harmful unless the costs of living, the essentials, are too expensive to afford, which is what we're seeing today. This is why it is important to keep the minimum wage consistent with inflation, so that so that if inflation goes up, the minimum wage workers are not harmed by something that's out of their control. Some people think that we should let the economy and the employers decide what is appropriate for a minimum wage instead of the government. Because if more people are making more money, then we should be paying more. However, even before the pandemic, 1 in 7 Americans was living in poverty, according to the the Oklahoma census records. And according to Claire Montalou, a researcher and assistant professor at the Goldman School of Public Policy, raising the minimum wage would close racial gaps, but also not have a significant impact on employment. But it would also raise children and families out of poverty, according to American Progress. But a raised minimum wage would also stimulate the economy because more people would be investing in more services. But of course, the federal minimum wage, if this policy were to be enacted, it would raise itself by small increments every year, so that U.S. businesses would have a time to adjust. And I want to make it clear that this raising the minimum wage is not a cure-all solution to poverty. Rather, this needs to be a solution that is enacted alongside renting regulations and labor laws that will improve the quality of life for the essential workers that have carried us through the pandemic.